Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us again this evening. The program Through My Eyes with Professor Bolaji Akinyemi. It promises to be an exciting program this evening, as usual. But this week, we are specifically having a town hall session. So we have some guests in the virtual studio already who will be putting their questions or commenting on the topic for today. But before we go into that, Prof, you're welcome this evening again.
Thank you very much. I've been looking forward to this town hall edition for almost 3 weeks now, and I am more interested actually in hearing the views of the people you have invited, rather than me, dominating the session with my answers. So this is going to be a learning session for me as well, and I join you in welcoming them to the virtual studio.
Uh, Thank you for that, Prof. But Prof, there are two things I want to throw to you before we go into those questions and we start to discuss the topic. The first one is that I hear from some reliable sources that you have taken a vaccine.
Yes, yes, yes. I took the vaccine yesterday, and thank goodness it was the Oxford vaccine, in which I have considerable faith in spite of the politics that is going on within Europe itself. Um, it doesn't mean that I still like needles. No, it was quite a dramatic session, but I took it. And I don't have any side effects. None so
Fantastic.
far. Yeah,
Fantastic.
my.
Oh, fantastic, Prof. Good to hear that. Well, one other question, the second one I wanted to ask is President Biden has been speaking for the first time alone with the press. What is your take on how that went and some of his comments about North Korea and China? He seems to be taking a slightly hard line with them. What are your comments on that before we go into our topic for today?
Um, I I enjoyed the press conference. It showed Biden as a man with views of his own. Um, you could tell what he liked and you could tell what he doesn't like, and he didn't try to waffle. For example, his views about the attempts being made by some states um, to restrict the voting rights and practices within their state. He was scathing in his comments, not only on moral grounds, but also on legal grounds. And he didn't speak as a politician. He spoke in the way we expect, Martin Luther King Jr. to speak. He was quite forceful. And he also left you, or let the viewers in no doubt, that he was going to try to upturn all those things at the federal level, so that the bill on human rights, civil rights, which has already gone past the House of Representatives, that he will support that bill and try and get the Senate to approve the bill, so it becomes federal law that will then overturn the what basically the Republican state houses of assembly are trying to do. The other one also that impressed me was his view on gun control. again, the man spoke from the heart. He didn't speak as a politician of, well, there are difficulties, or no. He condemned in no uncertain terms what had happened in Georgia and in Boulder, Colorado. And I liked him for that. You knew where he stood and what he was going to try to do um, over possession of guns in the United States. On immigration as well. Now, that became somehow conflicting at times when they were describing the condition of the 10-year-old or 11-year-old who had walked all the way from Guatemala to the American boundary, he was moved, he was touched. I mean, I suppose as a father, as a parent, um, the moral side of him was very, very obvious. But he said something which then struck me, that if the boy does not qualify to enter the United States, and they have an address of his mother in Guatemala, the boy will be put on a plane and flown back to Guatemala, and from there they can then make a proper application. So it wasn't as if, well, he will be allowed in at all costs, because that would have encouraged other people to come in. And people were expecting him to make gaffes. Uh, President Biden was noted for gaffes as senator, gaffes as vice president, gaffes as presidential candidate. But I thought he handled the session pretty well. Commendable performance, I would say.
Uh, Thank you for that analysis, Prof. Um, Before we start to go into the details as well, we'll let some of our guests come on and share their views. But, Prof, the topic for today, we're looking at the relevance of the Commonwealth as an institution, as a structure in modern civilization. And I know that we've touched on this in the past, where we said, well, how do we define what is civilization, and exactly how does that civilization relate to us in Africa, and how people outside of Africa, in the West, in the East, how they deal with civilization. Do you want to start with your views, Prof, in terms of this construct of the Commonwealth? You shared something, I think it was 2, 3 weeks ago, where you had raised concerns about the Commonwealth, and you even suggested at the time that maybe Nigeria and some of her neighbors should probably consider leaving the Commonwealth. Do you want to let us know what your positioning was on that before we start bringing our guests in?
Oh, thank you. If you don't mind, I'm usually obedient in allowing you to direct me on this program. But as a result of the views I threw out uh, 3 weeks ago, someone sent me uh, his own views, and it's a man I have a lot of respect for. Um, and I told him I won't mention his name, but I have a lot of respect for his views. So if you don't mind, let me start by reading out what he sent to me. Uh, it was not in support of my views. Actually, he was asking me to reconsider and look at the other side. But this is what he said to me. On the issue of the Commonwealth, I think it's better for Nigeria to maintain her membership of the body than getting out of it. Nigeria has clout within the body, being about the third largest member. The Commonwealth, 54 member states of different sizes and uniqueness, provide Nigeria with ready markets for her exports, which about a couple of years ago represented about 30%. Moreover, the UK being the mother country of the Commonwealth, Nigeria leaving the body will have deleterious effects on the huge diaspora Nigerians in the UK. If it is the view that Nigeria is not gaining anything substantial from the body, it's largely Nigeria's fault, given her poor leadership and ineptness in articulating and leveraging her clout to maximize her interests. India maximally benefits from the Commonwealth, given her preparedness and sense of direction. And finally, it's very unlikely that Nigeria can successfully persuade Ghana, Gambia, Sierra Leone, and not even Cameroon to join her in quitting the Commonwealth. So those are the views sent to me. I could deconstruct the basis on which the argument that is being made is based. But if our guests are already in the virtual studio, let me benefit and let our viewers benefit from their views. And if time permits, I will come in to now update my own views about the role of the Commonwealth in the civilizational structure of global politics.
All right, Prof. I'm going to bring in um, Professor Abigail Ogweze Ndisika. Um,
Good evening, Prof. Hello. Good evening, Prof.
Go ahead, please ask the question.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Prof. I've been following Through My Eyes with Prof, and I've enjoyed myself. For me, it's a master class on international affairs. But I'm a bit worried about the call for us to quit the Commonwealth. So I am 50-50 on Prof's position, but it's more experienced. But I'm quite worried. I'm talking from my perspective as a scholar. Being part of the Commonwealth has been offering young scholars, Nigerian young scholars, the opportunity for self-development, which the Nigerian state paid little or no attention to. So it's been giving us the opportunity for scholarships, Commonwealth scholarships, and we have our young academics go and train, young brains from the country go and train, and some hopefully come back to develop our country. So a bit the call for us to leave Commonwealth. I will ask the experts who are experts in international affairs, economic affairs, political issues, to try and prepare a balance sheet so that we can see the assets and liabilities before we take a position. And I'd like Prof to address that issue that I raised. Thank you very much.
Mr. Moderator, do you want me to talk?
Absolutely, Prof. Please respond to that.
All right. Thank you, Professor Abigail. I hear you, and I understand where you're coming from. Obviously, there is no association without benefits. But it is the quantum of benefits compared to what those benefits could be or should be. You've drawn attention to the scholarship and the training schemes which the Commonwealth affords our scholars. And the previous comment that I read out has talked about the trade relationships. And that if we are not getting enough, it is our fault. And I concede to both your views and the views of the gentleman that I read out. But I think it's more than this. The issue we need to address is the role of Britain in not assuring that one is getting the benefits that it should get. I don't believe that it is just due to our own leadership incompetence, even though that has a lot to it. But I'm not. I come at it from the viewpoint of a political scientist, and the problem we've had with Britain since Margaret Thatcher and up till now. My own experience with Margaret Thatcher and with other prime ministers who had come in was that they saw the Commonwealth more as a window dresser that they could use to portray Britain as a global power in charge of this multiracial, multicultural organization. But that when it comes to political issues, they would rather listen to the United States rather than distill what could be regarded as a Commonwealth position on that political issue and then push that, unless they try to get us to back their own position, so that when they say they are speaking on behalf of the 54 members or whatever the number is, they are actually pursuing their own interests. The tightening of immigration status. I don't think any special any special policies were designed to bring in Nigerian or Commonwealth scholars. I think Britain was pretty tough on that. Just like their position on Brexit, determined by immigration policies against fellow European countries, especially people coming from Eastern Europe, showed that Britain was always preferred to be an insular country with insular interests. And that's what really bothers me. Now that Britain has decided to leave Europe, she's now going to try and build up the perception of the Commonwealth as a body she takes very, very seriously. But I always prefer multilateral agreements, multilateral values to singular agreements that can be broken up at any time. And believe me, Britain is not going to sign any agreement with Commonwealth countries on an individual basis that will not be to that at the back of the British mind would be we need to pull these people out of any European Union arrangements and pull them to our side, but according to terms, you see, according to terms decided by Britain. So I haven't seen in my experience as a scholar and as a former minister, I haven't seen Britain showing any definition of the Commonwealth as a body that all benefit from. It's always been towards the benefit of Great Britain. I hope that maybe now that they've left the European Union, they're going to get spokesperson and so on. They're going to get prime ministers and ministers who are going to be Commonwealth in their attitudes. But the first thing that this present prime minister did was to abolish the autonomy of the ministry that was dealing with aid to Commonwealth countries and merge it with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs itself, which has led to a diminished package of foreign aid to Commonwealth countries. So, but I am open to views that can persuade me that there are benefits, substantive benefits to Commonwealth countries, not just Nigeria, India, Ghana, Sierra Leone, that there are substantive benefits that will be in the package of the Commonwealth. I will be open to such ideas.
All right, Prof. Before I think Professor Abigail wants to respond to that, but I also have I think it's Ambassador Akinsanya here. Ambassador, I don't know if you'll be able to turn your camera on or at least unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. It's always a pleasure for me to be in the forum where my prof, my minister, speaks. Been with him for years, and that's my minister, my role model, my mentor, my everything. So I'm not surprised by his clairvoyance. I will be speaking more like a professional, and Prof knows that I served in London at the time that he was minister, and also former retired. One of the key assignments that I had before I moved to Addis Ababa as ambassador was the organization of CHOGM in the year 2003. I was head of secretariat with Ambassador Essan, that Prof also knows very well. So I'm speaking more like a professional that I am. The Commonwealth is voluntary. What unites Commonwealth with other countries is the fact that they are former British territories. Multilingual, with multidimensional aspects of our relations. When I first saw the topic, I thought there was an intrinsic linkage between what is now happening to the British monarchy, the racist tendencies, and this linkage to the fact that, if the monarchy continues to be controversial, as it has been over the years, what is the need? What is their contribution to civilization? Well, my perspective is this. First, that the universalism of good governance, human rights, those shared values that are universal, and with that Nigeria is committed to multilateralism. I believe that this has a bit of relevance in spite of all that is happening in the British monarchy. Over the years, the symbol of the Commonwealth has been the monarchy. And even though there are a lot of republics and many countries have, there are small countries, there are big countries, ranging from India to Kiribati to Antigua to Nigeria. And I believe that those structures, those shared values, human rights, and Nigeria was a party to the Harare Declaration that set out those shared values of good governance, democracy, human rights, and all that. And there was a time that Nigeria was out of the Commonwealth. It took some painstaking efforts and negotiation to come back. Other countries like South Africa left the Commonwealth and they came back. Even Zimbabwe, that got out of the Commonwealth at the time that we were hosting the CHOGM in 2003, is coming to join. So my thinking along the lines is that we are committed to multilateralism, even though our governance is not where we want to be. The other elements of the structures of the Commonwealth, like the Commonwealth of Learning, the Commonwealth Business Council, Commonwealth Foundation, and all that, played very important role in the development of our private sector, the Nestles of this world, the Cadburys, even though things have changed now. But I think for me, as long as in terms we still have those shared values, we want to be there. We are not there. Those elements of those shared values and goals and where we want to be, that British, eschews or, controls should guide us in the sense of where we want to be. Even though some people have talked about having a sort of trado democracy, a sort of democracy that fits into our own traditions, our culture. But there's the universalism of all this. And I believe to that extent, in Nigeria, we continue to uphold those principles that Britain stands for. Yes, there have been quite a lot of changes because of the controversy of the British monarchy, because of the dilution. Rwanda is a member, Cameroon is a member. But I think to the extent that you have the poor, you have the rich, you have the small states, and you have the big countries within the Commonwealth, I believe there's a lot of sense in Nigeria still continue to be a member of the Commonwealth, to the extent that we still adhere to those shared values. And I believe that it is relevant to our cause, and we resort to multilateralism, which is key to our foreign policy postures. So this is what brings the relevance. If it is the issue of the British monarchy and the fact that with Brexit, it has lost a lot of its things to other European countries, Germany, Italy. What still keeps Britain is the education and the British monarchy. And they are not in the executive. We didn't have the Secretary General. So my perspectives is that it still makes a lot. We have seen it. We went out because of the problem we had over Saru. They got us out. We came back. Others that have left are coming back. Zimbabwe is coming. This means because of those shared values of the universalism of civilization. I think that it makes some sense for us to continue to be part. The problem of the racist tendencies of the British monarchy is internal. It's internal. And we have seen it, even in terms of Meghan's mother-in-law. In spite of all that he did, there are problems, in the British monarchy. So I think if Commonwealth, because of these shared values, are strengthened, and Nigeria still has a lot to gain in terms of even our negotiations with the WTO, to the extent that we have some capacities, training, Commonwealth of Learning, Commonwealth Foundation, Commonwealth Business Council. All these are structures that we have a very important role to play to enhance our own development postures.
All right,
These are some
Ambassador,
of
let
my
me pass
views,
this
Prof.
to Prof so he can respond to you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that Ambassador Akinyemi brought in this issue of the monarchy, because actually that's what has led to this discussion that we are having this evening. And something so two things I would like to say about that. First of all, the Queen is the head of the Commonwealth. So whatever controversy there is about her is not an internal affairs of Britain. I've met her 4 times, and I have been amazed at the way even heads of states behave towards her. Reverence, respect, and if heads of states can show this, you can imagine what we foreign ministers, the kind of, reverence, that we will show towards her. She has already taken one step, which I will want us to notice, and that is an announcement that the palace will set up a body, a section, whatever you want to call it, of multiculturalism within the palace. In other words, an admission that there was a lacuna, a gap that should have been addressed, that setting up the Commonwealth Secretariat did not serve. The Commonwealth Secretariat did not represent the Queen, Her Majesty, as the head of the Commonwealth. Believe me, there is no one who would be more enthusiastic than I am in welcoming the Commonwealth to become a major structural participant in a global civilization, because we need to move away from well, we can't move away from a white civilization, a Chinese civilization, an African civilization. We can't move away from that. But when they all come together to form a global civilization, the Commonwealth is positioned, if it is better organized, to push for that global civilization, for global values. Some of the values that Ambassador Akinyemi has referred to. But it has to be, you have to go beyond simply proclamations or documents. I would like to see it in action. And that was really what I was referring to. That at the time that Britain was in the EU, I didn't see her pushing the interests of the Commonwealth. I didn't. And I also did not see, since Margaret Thatcher, the British government saying, what are the Commonwealth interests on this issue that we should push? If there are instances, I will be glad to hear about that. Now, I just made reference to something the palace had just done within the past 2 weeks in saying it will set up a body within the palace that will promote this, I think they call it diversity interests, which to me means, multicultural. Now, that's doing something substantive and something specific, but not for us to meet at Chogom, which is the summit, sign communique, and then go away and not see that communique being reflected in the policies of Great Britain, that is still the mother country, as what somebody said to me, because it really, in a way, outstrips all of us in terms of our power status. It has Britain, if Britain is going to take the Commonwealth seriously, there are things she will have to do so that the rest of the world will even see the Commonwealth not as a footstool of Great Britain, but as a substantive movement in the global civilization that you referred to.
Prof, before I go back to, I think it's Professor Abigail who's got a hand raised there. Before I go back to her, even in the United Kingdom, where we are here, we don't really hear that much about the Commonwealth. We do hear about United Nations a lot more. We hear about, for those of us who come from Africa, Nigeria specifically, we hear about the African Union and some of these other establishments that are more specific, more targeted. The question I want to put to you is this, and to the team that we have in the virtual studio is this. If we were to lose the Commonwealth, will that not strengthen some of the ties we have within ECOWAS and some of these other organizations that we have in Africa, like Africa Union? Would it not strengthen that tie as the group that brings us together rather than a structure created by the British institution?
Well, that really is my position. When you look at the way positions are fought for within the United Nations, ECOWAS has parameters. African Union has parameters. It is at those two levels that you actually take the decisions on candidates, and you then take those candidates to the United Nations, where they are then ratified. Since I was a minister, and this quite some time ago, I haven't heard that, oh, well, the Commonwealth met and ratified this position for Africa or position for India and so on, and then took these positions to the United Nations. I haven't heard of it. ECOWAS and you see the geographical entities have actually become the pillars to run elections, to run or to run resolutions which you want to push at the global level, and then the global level simply ratifies it. So of course, professionals like Ambassador Orchestra will say, well, look, you don't move away from one organization if it is not really doing damage to your foreign policy aspirations. It's better you stay there, even if it is not as important to you as, say, the ECOWAS or the African Union and what and what have you. I mean, I am sure that when India is fighting for a position at the United Nations, yes, it does talk to Commonwealth countries, but its primary campaign is targeting East South Asian countries to which that post has been allocated. No post gets allocated to the Commonwealth.
All right, Prof. Let me go to Professor Abigail in the studio again. Prof.
Um, Thank you, Prof. I've listened to your reactions. But I think when you talk about multilateralism and you are also looking at bilateral dimension, we shouldn't just throw away bilateral relationships. I think that uh, the Commonwealth using countries like Nigeria for window dressing may not largely be their fault. We should be talking about our representatives who attend such meetings. Does it mean that they don't go with their own agenda or they have poor negotiation skills? And I think we should begin to strengthen our negotiation skills to look at what we get from such groups. And I would like you to respond to that. Then talking about the Commonwealth not taking decisions about the interest of its member states, don't you think too that the monarch and the leadership may not be getting feedback from member states, and with programs like this commentary on international issues, I think that it will serve as a form of feedback and will be setting agenda for them. Because if we don't set agenda, they are not likely to know what are concerns, in belonging to such associations group. So I also feel that your position, I'm quite happy with your position concerning what is happening in Buckingham Palace. You have really deconstructed such issues and what the monarch, the leadership should do in terms of what has been happening with the accusation of racism. But I think that we should be talking to ourselves as member states. If we don't set agenda, if our people just attend such meetings to drink tea and sign communicate without looking at the implication, for developing country, I think that the more the merrier, but we should look inwards. I would like to hear your views on that. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I concede the strength of your views and the arguments you have put forward are quite important and quite relevant. Nigeria is probably not the example one should push forward uh, in trying to in trying to define what's wrong with the Commonwealth as set up right now, because Nigeria is very disorganized on the leadership level. And Shegun will probably agree with me, but diplomats don't like to speak up when it comes to state secrets. But what represents national interest has always been a major problem for the ministry. And even after decisions are taken that this and this are what we will do, the division within Nigeria itself creates a problem in terms of them pushing those policies. I was a victim myself of the controversy within the Commonwealth about whether we should impose economic sanctions on South Africa during the apartheid years, or whether we should engage South Africa in dialogue. And long after we had taken a decision under the instructions of President Babangida, they went behind the ministry, they went behind me to now get that decision reversed, not because the initial decision was wrong, but because the personalities within Nigeria who wanted that decision changed were people that President Babangida could not say no to. There are other examples that I could give. I don't know about Ambassador Akinyemi, but that I could give, that it is the lack of unity within Nigeria in coalescing national interest that weakens the status and role of Nigeria in international organizations, including the Commonwealth. I am actually, my view has changed slightly. I've become a bit optimistic since the palace announced the setting up of this Office of Diversity, because it means that part of the advice the Queen will be getting, and after her, Prince Charles, in relationship to the Commonwealth, will not simply be dependent on British civil servants. And Her Majesty showed this during the problem again with South Africa, when Margaret Thatcher was determined that her view must prevail, even if it's going to lead to a breakup of the Commonwealth. And Her Majesty, without seeking the advice of the British Foreign Office, decided to invite the African leaders who were present in London for the Commonwealth Conference to a dinner at the palace. And that was a signal to Margaret Thatcher that I'm not going to allow this Commonwealth to break up. I'm aligning myself with the views of the African leaders. She didn't have to call a press conference. People could see what she was doing. So Professor Abigail is right that if structures are put in place for Her Majesty to receive information and advice, not from the British Foreign Office alone, but from, and the Commonwealth Secretariat is not doing that simply because it's difficult. Well, Shegun was in London several times. Whether the Commonwealth Secretariat has independent views of its own outside the summit is something
Prof,
I'm not
I think
aware of.
Ambassador Akinsoya wants to respond.
Prof, you are right. But we had a Yaku in the secretariat, and we had a Nigerian in the secretariat. And that was the time that I was in London, and I know that the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation was very effective, just like the CBC, the Commonwealth Business Council, and the foundation. I agree with you that, yes, it appears most of the positions, Commonwealth outside London, outside Marlborough House or in other places, probably informal, but effective. I'll give two examples. I was in Addis Ababa as the permanent, as the ambassador and the PR to the AU. And that was the time that Nigeria was pursuing the Ezuwini consensus of Security Council reforms and the possibility of Nigeria coming in as a member of the permanent of the Security Council. Now, India and Nigeria, under my watch in the Permanent Representatives Committee, and India, we formed an informal group of the Commonwealth to pursue Nigeria's interests. Same thing with when we are negotiating a review of the Cotonou agreement under an enlarged WTO agreement. See, the capacity that that the Commonwealth provides for negotiation is still going to be very important, even within the WTO, because the WTO, there's going to be a lot of negotiations around commodities and North-South. And these multilateral or multidimensional informal groupings will assist the negotiating capacity of small countries. Kiribati, for instance, or Antigua, or other small countries that probably do not have the capacity. They utilize the Commonwealth Training Program, the Commonwealth Technical Fund to be able to pursue this. I agree that there have been quite a lot of difficulties within our country that does not make us take the best out of the Commonwealth. I want to give the example of during the time of the ACP, the African, Caribbean, and Pacific negotiations with Ambassador Luciano, or the North-South, the Paris conference that we have that went towards the new international economic order. It was most of North-South, and countries, Commonwealth groupings play a very important role because it contains of membership of rich and poor countries. It contains members with capacity and those without capacity, and they lend this into negotiation. So it makes some sense that there will be some utility if we can put our acts together in terms of strengthening the Commonwealth and taking the best out of the the structures and what is. It's a pity that it's losing its steam. The Commonwealth is losing its steam. Marlborough House used to be a place that we do have. When I was in London, we do have meetings on the continuous. We even have a desk officer, not only in the Marlborough House itself, but at Northumberland Avenue, that was involved with Commonwealth, issues, and to be able to bring it to the doorsteps of Nigerians, and even in terms of the civil society organizations, the Commonwealth of Learning, the Commonwealth Foundation, and even in terms of the youth development, the Commonwealth Games, the Commonwealth, so there is a sort of morality of best practices in governance. Even within the African Union, now, I mean, Nigeria is now lucky to be in charge of political and peace and security. And the African governance architecture being matched with the peace and security architecture will bring in quite a lot of new dimensions in terms of, and when you talk about the best practices in governance, Britain stands out, and the Commonwealth still has these relics. But what is important is for the members to put their heads together to strengthen the structures that is within to make the Commonwealth more effective. Britain will have no choice after Brexit, because that is what they have, apart from the importance of the British monarchy and the government to tourism, your tourism stand, but also the education element is still very important. And I believe that what is a pity that our situation, Nigeria is in a situation that is precarious at the moment. But as time goes on, I believe that there are still things that we can take out of the Commonwealth to strengthen our governance capacities.
All right, let me get Prof to respond to that, Ambassador. Because I think you and Professor Abigail are raising an important point. Prof, before you respond to that, I want to add a point to it. And that is this fact about the ineffectiveness of the organization, of the running of the Commonwealth. Is that where the issue is? Because I think both Ambassador Akinsanya and Professor Abigail have raised that point.
Well, you see, I've listened carefully to both of them. And to some extent, there's probably only slight differences between what I'm saying and what they are saying. Because if you listen carefully to, especially Ambassador Akinsanya, he keeps saying, if we can get this done, if we can do that, then things will be better. Which means, as of now, things are not what they should be, which is my position. But I mean, I've listened very carefully to the views advanced by my colleagues on the panel. I don't want it to turn out to be, counter pushing one view or the other, or one narrative or the other. I will be perfectly happy, and if the Commonwealth can actually become, in all ramifications, a multicultural body a multi-civilizational body that would then add its weight, which could be considerable, will add its weight into what we are all trying to do, which is to create a global multicultural civilization. It's not going to pay us. When I say us, I'm talking about other members. If in a way the contribution of the Commonwealth to global civilization is actually the contribution in effect of British civilization. At the beginning, the Commonwealth was called British Commonwealth. And then I think they knew, this is not going to sit down well. British are very clever. So they dropped the British, but kept the Commonwealth, which to all intents and purposes, people in the world still see as a British Commonwealth for two reasons. One, Her Majesty is the head of the Commonwealth. And if you remember the last summit that was held in London, she appealed to the members to please, after her, allow Prince Charles to be head of the Commonwealth. Well, like what I was saying about respect and deference to Her Majesty, nobody dared say, well, we will go and consider it. No, the answer was, if that's what Her Majesty wants, we will do that. Fine, I have no questions with that. But if it is going to be that, then Her Majesty and Prince Charles, when he takes over, and Prince William, when he takes over, must be a multicultural figure with multicultural views. I remember Ambassador Akinyemi was talking about the ACP negotiations, African, Caribbean, and Pacific negotiations within the EU. I remember at that time that, in fact, most of the complaints from Commonwealth countries was that Britain was more European in her positions during the negotiations within the EU than a Commonwealth country pushing and advancing the interests of the Commonwealth members of the ACP. That was the complaint that's been made at that time. What I don't want to happen is, now that Britain has left the European Union and has now found that she's got to use the Commonwealth now as one of the anchors of her multilateral relationships. I don't want it to be at the expense of the relationship of African, Caribbean, Pacific countries within the EU, because we still have interests in the European Union that Britain cannot replace those interests. Britain is going to try to replace those interests. Please trust me, because that's a major argument, that she can get better deals from bilateral agreements than being a member of the EU. And that's how, so she's going to try it. And I just want that to happen. That's number one. Number two, I will be happy I agree with Ambassador Akinyemi that the Commonwealth Secretariat is not a shadow of its old self. That has to do with the personality of people elected as secretaries general, but it also reflects the view of member states that what they want is more a secretary than a general. So I think the last, if you like, the last two active secretaries general we had was Ramphal and Emeka Nyaoku. Multilateralism has tended to creep back. It's not only the Commonwealth Secretariat that experienced this, even the United Nations Secretariat also had experienced this. So I'll be happy for a more effective Commonwealth Secretariat, but it must reflect in values that it will pursue, the interests it will pursue. It must reflect multilateralism, globalization, and not just be a mouthpiece of Great Britain.
Uh, Prof, there's another question here. I believe this is Professor Abigail again. Prof, please unmute yourself.
Prof, and thank you very much, and the other ambassadors that have joined Prof to deconstruct this issue of the Commonwealth. I think that we have had enough lamentation, and the whole issue is boiling down to the ineffectiveness or poor effectiveness of the body. So I would like to suggest that Prof should use one of the sessions on this program to set an agenda to review the programs of the Commonwealth in terms of multiculturalism, education, economic issue, political lineage, and ideology, and all that, to set an agenda for the body to enhance its effectiveness, to enhance its effectiveness. Because from today's debate, it's obvious that there are still a few things we can gain. Together we can achieve better. But I think that the issue has been feedback, and as they pointed out, the functionality of the Secretariat and the Commonwealth Secretariat. So they should review the activities of Commonwealth across different macro issues: politics, economy, education, culture, and set an agenda for the body to enhance its effectiveness. I think that is where we should be going, Prof, with very due regard. And you have what it takes to tell the world, Commonwealth group, how to go, instead of calling for a quit. That's my submission. Thank you, sir.
Prof, are you going to take that on?
Fine. She's behaved like a diplomat tonight, Let's get away from the, counter argument. And she's sketched the parameters of a way forward. I think, however, that I'm not really in a position to do that. There are, bodies within the Secretariat. Ambassador Akinyemi will probably know NGOs and what have you that can advance the positions that Professor Abigail is putting forward. But I think, it's something that should be embraced. It will help the Secretariat, and also it will help the role of Britain in the Commonwealth. Britain has to become more positive towards the Commonwealth. She just has to be, and less abrasive. The views of Boris Johnson towards the Commonwealth. I'm not sure you all remember how rude he had been to Commonwealth leaders when he came in. It's just now, as I said, that they've left the European Union, that they are now looking for another umbrella under which they will operate. That all of a sudden, the term Commonwealth is now surfacing from the lips of almost every high-ranking civil servant in Britain. But
Prof,
it's people have I'm sure there are our listeners who have listened to Professor Abigail, and will push forward those ideas.
we also have Ambassador Keshi in the virtual studio, Prof. And I'm sure that he would want to lend his voice to this conversation. Ambassador, do you want to unmute yourself, please?
A very good evening, Professor, and thank you, moderator. I had no intention to speak because I came in late due to circumstances beyond my control. I was rushing from somewhere and ran into some challenges getting home. But I came in when my good friend and brother, Ambassador Akin was speaking, and I listened to him very attentively. And I think that Prof has addressed the issues very well. And I think I'm also in agreement with the last speaker on what we need to do, or what Prof needs to do, which he has indicated that we need to find another organization to do that. I just think that that is what we really need to do. And Prof was right to point out the growing weakness of the both the Commonwealth and the United Nations, and even the ACP as well. And some of these organizations, either for so many reasons, are not as functional as they used to be in the 70s, 80s, and some parts of the 90s. But I think that with Britain getting out of the European Union and looking for new partners, a new route to its own salvation, it's possible that they might add some impetus to making the Commonwealth a very vibrant organization in the near future. I think we just have to wait and see. But I think that the conversation so far, the little I've been able to hear, I think all the speakers have actually said what needs to be said about the situation of the Commonwealth today. So that's my little contribution, and I thank you for giving me the floor. Thank you.
May I, Mr. Moderator, may I say this?
Sure, Prof.
Ambassador Keshi was the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, one of the top mandarins responsible for policy. So, though softly spoken, don't get yourself deceived. He is a pillar, even now, among the foreign policy elite in Nigeria. And he is one of those I had in mind when I was saying that there are people, either on an individual basis or structurally within organizations, who can push the parameters of what Professor Abigail was advocating as a way forward to make the Commonwealth more friendly.
That, Prof. And with that, let me just see if there's anyone raising their hand in the virtual studio. No. Any last questions? I think that's the last point. Prof, any parting shots before we close the program this evening?
I'm not a soldier, whether retired or otherwise. So stop asking me for parting shots.
I was thinking
There
about the
must
vaccine, Prof. Vaccine shots.
there must be a more peaceful, what have you. No, I
Noted.
just I'm happy each time I have an opportunity to meet with the top-notch officers, though retired, but who had contributed a lot. And you see, they represent a generation that I share a vision with, which is of a great Nigeria, a generation that has been disappointed by Nigeria's refusal to aim, for the moon. And it must be, I have known both ambassadors for a long, long time. And it's always a pleasure for me to share platforms with them. Professor Abigail, well, she and I, we have another platform where we exchange ideas, and I've found her, I mean, she's very calm and peaceful on this program, but on the other platform that I interact with her, when she decides to sink her teeth into an issue, believe me, you better listen, because she shows her commitment and her attachment. But she also shares with us views about what Nigeria should be, which Nigeria is not. So this has been a very pleasant evening with me, and I thank I thank my fellow members on this platform, and I hope we will do this town hall thing more often, so that we continue to enrich not only ourselves but people who listen to us with the diversity of views that this kind of program generates. I'm happy to have spent this evening with them.
Absolutely. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and I can see some of the comments across all the platforms at the same time. So, just a quick announcement. The times change over the weekend in the UK. So the program will be shifting 1 hour earlier in Nigeria. So it's going to be 7 p.m. in Nigeria and in the UK. And remember, it's a weekly program. So every week we hear views from Professor Akinyemi across international events across the nations of the world. So we will be back next week, but it's going to be 7 p.m. in Nigeria, as it would be in the UK at the same time. Once again, thank you to those in the virtual studio, ambassadors, professors. We thank you. We appreciate you for being here this evening and for your wisdom. The sessions are immediately available on our YouTube channel. Please, I will put that right now. It's Syncterface Media on YouTube and on Facebook as well. If you want to go back to watch it, it's already live on those platforms. So thank you all for joining us. We'll be back again next week.